This time around we're going to make two pieces of wood, a big blocky one and a long skinny one. When those combine, you have a traditional mallet. And the nice thing about this is that it's got a very heavy, dense head, so it's easy to hit pretty hard, just relying on the weight of the mallet. And also, since you can take it apart, it's a lot easier to store, and you can make a new handle if you need to, or a new head. So I have this small scrap of really nice wood that I want to use for the handle. It's a bit shorter than what you'd typically use, but I want to make a smaller mallet, and I think that'll work out well. Now I just need to get to my secret wood stash and find the right piece for the head. All right, handle and head are ready. I think that size will work. It'll extend a little bit above, but I don't know, we'll try it. I need to cut a taper on the handle so that it can wedge itself into the head. The exact angle doesn't really matter here. I really do need to get a good vise, so I think that's going to be one of my next purchases. I'm trying to get better with proper sawing technique, which means my wrist is more or less locked in place and my upper arm is working like a pendulum, back and forth directly in line with the blade. Once I had the wedge cut off and had the shape that I wanted, I brought the plane to it and worked back and forth quite a bit. It was pretty tough because this handles some curly wood, so the grain's kind of all over the place, but eventually I got it relatively smooth, and then I had to check it for square. Once I was sure that it was square, I used a card scraper to smooth off the edges. It didn't have to be perfect at this point since I'd come back and work on it more, but I wanted to get it relatively close to the real finish. I marked the center of the top and the bottom of the handle and drew a line between them, and that would help me line everything up with the head. So then I needed to figure out where the center of the head was so that I could line up that center mark and then make all my marks based on that point. With the handle lined up on the mallet head, then I could use my combination square to mark all the edges, and I just used a marking knife here to cut in a little bit and make sure my marks were as accurate as possible. I used a Forstner bit on my drill press to slowly work my way through and cut out a big chunk of this. That would simplify some of my chisel work so that the center was gone and I could just work on the edges and getting them flat. Of course, you have to go slowly and keep bringing the bit up so that it can eject all the chips, or else you clog it up pretty easily. when I drilled through the bottom, it actually lined up with the top, which means all my marks were made in the right place and that my taper would turn out correctly. The chiseling work was pretty easy, just pretty laborious, I guess. I started in quite a ways from my knife marks so that I could be a little bit rough and take out the majority of the material, and then I could come back and be more precise as I got closer and closer to that knife mark. I ended up actually breaking my weak mallet again. This is not the first time, so I ended up gluing it together and clamping it, and then I switched over to a different mallet that I have. I think you can see really well here when you have a really sharp chisel and work yourself carefully just taking off a fine bit of wood, you can get a really, really smooth wall. And this is what helps make sure you actually have good contact with the handle. So once the majority of everything is chiseled out, then you can pound the handle into place and see where it's connecting and pull it back out. And you can also look for marks and bruising to see where it's kind of catching, and just clean up those places and keep working on it until it gets through the right amount. Using the pressure of my left hand and tapping on the top of the handle, I can work the head all the way up to where it wedges in. The idea is to get this to maybe stick out half an inch for the handle. Over time it will slide in a little bit more, so you don't want to go too aggressively early on. But once that fits well, then it's just time to shape the handle. So I made just an approximate mark of kind of where I wanted the bottom of the handle to be its full width, and then I could use a spoke shave to kind of cut off the corners there to give it a better feel. This was my first time using the spoke shave, but it was really easy and straightforward and a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Then I switched over to a rasp to round over the corners, and once they were pretty good, I switched to some sandpaper to smooth those out a little bit more. I wanted the top of the mallet to be curved just a little bit. This was kind of tricky. I ended up using a plane and cutting across at an angle so that it wouldn't break away any of the pieces of wood. You can get blowout or splitting pretty easily if you just go straight across, but at an angle it works well. And then I could switch back to the spoke shave and smooth out that angle a lot more. And once it was smooth, then it was time to switch over to the card scraper and get it so that it was really, really smooth and looking good. I think you can look closely and see how much more smooth that becomes. I used my electric miter saw to cut the slight angles in each of the faces, and that makes it line up better with the arc as you're actually hammering with the mallet. I really didn't want to do that by hand with how thick and hard this piece of wood was. And I just finished everything off with some Danish oil. I had a lot of fun making this traditional mallet. It's a little bit smaller than traditional size, but it's the size that I want and it works really well. So I'm looking forward to getting a lot of use out of this. My previous mallet that I had made was on the lathe and it was meant for more delicate things, but since I never made a stronger one, I started to use it for really harsh and heavy work, and I've broken it and repaired it a couple of times. So it's nice to finally have this one. This was my first time using a spoke shave to make these rounded edges and smoothing over the top. That's a fantastic tool. It's really, really simple. It's easy to use and maintain, and I find it to be a lot of fun. The one big mistake I feel like I made was I just kind of went overboard rounding out the top, and so it makes it look like there's quite the gap, but if you look at the bottom, it's a lot tighter and looks a lot better, and overall the handle's held in the head extremely well. It just doesn't quite look the way I wanted. I really just wanted to round off the corners just a little bit, and I got carried away with the rasp, and that's okay. It's a tool and it's meant to be used and abused, so it doesn't need to look perfect. One more thing before I go. I'm getting ready to go on vacation for a couple of weeks, so I'll be probably not posting videos for a little bit, because once I get back I'll have some stuff to take care of, but then I'll get back to woodworking and get back to editing and then get back to posting. So slight break, but I'm still alive and well and looking forward to the next project.